So I'm joined today by Sam Akinluyi, most recently UK MD of Innocent.
Yep.
Previously in big jobs with Nestle and Mars, Commerce Industry World. And I brought you in specifically, Sam, to talk diversity and inclusion and hopefully dig a bit further. And the reason I say that is we're asked so frequently about bits and pieces, and at times I feel as if I'm not clued up enough about what I can do to make a difference. Mm-hmm. When I say it like that, I remember back when the George Floyd passing happened, and I remember there was a surge in the Black Lives Matter movement. And at that point in time, a lot of people were encouraged to tell their tales. And at that point in time, we'd probably been friends for 25 years. And I discovered I didn't even know your real name, which I find flabbergasting. But I wanted to open with that. Tell us a bit about your journey and where life has been different for you than it has for me.
No, well, thanks. Like I said, we've known each other a long time. And to be honest, I'd never even thought about this subject at all until George Floyd. In fact, I've probably gone the other way, which was stop being a victim, just work hard. No one's done me any favors, and I've done all right. So you just stop it. And that was my view on everything to do with it. Until that happened, and I think maybe it's because of COVID, and everyone goes back to or in their rooms or in their houses. And I was like, hang on a minute. How did this impact me growing up? Because I was brought up to be really strong, to just rise above it all. But then you look back and you start thinking, oh, actually, maybe my friends didn't have this same experience in those situations. And I've got obviously a corporate background, but I was born in Nigeria. I moved here when I was 6 with my parents. They were both academics, so they moved to Brighton in 1989. And so there weren't any black people in Brighton in 1989. Interestingly, if you moved here, and I'm an immigrant, you probably moved to black areas. Like the Brixtons or maybe up to Birmingham, but because my parents moved with work, they moved to Brighton. So I've always been in white environments. So I take it for granted being in a place like this. It's really easy for me. One thing I realized was actually you could be born here, have been brought up in Brixton, and actually you've never really been in a white environments before. Because you're kind of with your own all the time. So that's the thing that was a bit different for me, which is when we moved when I was 6, I've just got used to these environments, which means that I'm not the same as maybe the black person I walk past down the road. But my experience of that, when you talk about the name, was I was known as Belumi till I was 6. I was brought up in Nigeria. My mum and dad are from 2 different parts of Nigeria. So they only spoke in English. So even in Nigeria, I could only speak English. But English is the common language there. We came over, and I remember the first 6-year-old boy I went to say hello to in the playground, and they couldn't pronounce my name. But Samuel is the first name on my birth certificate, just so happens to be. So I went home at 6 and I said to my parents, I don't want anyone to laugh at me or feel that awkwardness of not being able to pronounce my name. So I changed my name. I said, okay, I'm going to be known as Sam. Samuel.
So as a 6-year-old boy, life was different to you to other people.
Because so I often think like, oh, so you probably wouldn't have had to do that.
No.
And that's okay. So that was the thing I was realizing, which was, I've had a different life. And we talked about, over different experiences, and it's fine. But you do have to acknowledge that people grow up differently, but you grow up differently yourself. And that's why I think this is where D&I falls down, because all of a sudden you're looking at me saying, oh yeah, that was my experience. But all of a sudden, because you look like you do, you're not allowed to be any different. You're not allowed to have like a different background. So therefore, probably some of the people who can make the big decisions to change things are not even included in the conversation. So, I mean, that's a bit about my sort of black experience, and there's a few more examples. But when I was in industry, I was running Innocent in the UK and Ireland, you look around, you think there's no one that really looks like me. Or at 33, I was the most senior black person in the industry. And the consumer goods industry is the biggest industry in the UK, because you've got all of retail. You've got Tesco, which is the biggest private employer in the UK. You've got Nestle, that's where I started, massive company. But no one, the representation was really low.
How conscious of that have you been on your journey?
Well, I didn't have to be, because I was 6 years old and I was used to it. So, but other people would have been more conscious. So there was a lady who used to work for me at Salt, and she came into an office obviously majority white, and we had lunch, and she was like, Sam, how do you even interact? Like, she just wasn't used to it.
Yeah.
I don't think about it at all because, like I said, we've been friends since we were 16 years old.
Yeah.
Most of my friends are white.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the last time I walked into a room and thought I'm the only black person.
Had you thought about it during your career on the journey?
No. I was reminded of it by some of the probably racist comments. Like when I was 21, 22, I got told by a boss, I really think you should really come to this meeting. I was like, I wonder why. Like, I'm 22, I shouldn't really be in that meeting. So you really get on with the buyer. I used to sell. I was like, what's going on here? And I remember 2 days later turning up for the meeting, and the buyer was a big black guy just like me.
Yeah, yeah.
So you kind of think, okay, now I know I'm black.
Yeah, yeah.
Or so those kind of things happened. But me, myself, I think I was brought up in a way where it was like, you're better than people who are racist, or you just have to rise above it.
Yeah.
So you just have to be better.
There's a level where you're fortunate in that context because you were brought up by two really good, wholesome individuals who have guided that path.
Yeah, which is really important. Again, that's why this is so much nuance. The percentage of black men that don't have both parents growing up is astronomically high.
Yeah.
And for example, both my parents my dad's got a PhD, my mum's got a master's degree, and they're both still together. And yes, I've been brought up in a different environment to other people. And you have to remember this is about the individual.
Yeah.
If you step back from all of it and you just say, but there's only one at 33, there's no one more senior than you in an organization, you can start asking the question, well, I wonder why that is.
Yeah.
And it's not because the industry's racist.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of stuff like that happens, and it's more than one thing that means that your chances of ending up in your industry or in my industry are diminished.
Yeah. Well, that's part of why I wanted us to have this discussion, right? On a regular basis, I'm told, we need a new head of XYZ. And we want to poach someone from one of our rivals. Here's the 10 firms you want to go to, but you must send us a diverse shortlist. And I sit in the meeting and I go, okay, well, Mark that does it here is a white male, middle-aged. Steve that does it here, Paul that does it here, boom, boom. But as we go through those 10, I go, every single one of them doesn't hit any of the criteria that you've just told me that we've got to hit. How can I do something different in that situation?
But you're starting right at the top of the iceberg, which is, of course, you're not going to find them.
Yeah.
Because they're not there.
Yeah.
So actually it's been a real boon for people in my position, because everyone was thinking, wow, you're capable and you're black.
Yeah.
Fancy coming working here.
Yeah.
So you've got a handful of people that could just probably command a premium for their salaries. But no one's thinking about the long game, which is, hang on a minute, in compliance or in financial services, why aren't there more people there in the first place?
Yeah.
Do they even know about this industry growing up?
Yeah.
So for my industry, I was like, I'm not interested in anything other than early careers or early talent or your first job.
Yeah.
And my view is, if you find enough people and you get them ready so they get the job on merit, unfortunately, it would take about 10 years.
Yeah.
But once it gets to a conversation with someone like you who's dealing with more senior people, you at least get a choice.
Yeah.
Not the same people moving around. There's not many people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know many people that are as senior as me in the industry. So it took me 20 years to get some here.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Sorry, I paused because I'm reflecting so much while we're talking, because there are certain jobs we get, right? Like I get asked to recruit a market risk leader. And even on the gender side, when you trawl LinkedIn for analytics, 30% of candidates are female, 70% are male. So I can't really dictate whatever's already there. It's harder to do that if we're talking ethnicity, because there's not necessarily the stats to find it. You have to go looking, you have to ask the questions. But the biggest talking point for me right now is social mobility.
Yeah.
Because people come to us now and say, hey, for this big senior job, don't worry, we don't care if they do or don't have a degree.
Yeah.
But for 15 years, you've only hired people that are 2-1 or better from a Russell Group university. So we can't close that gap without change. Now, I completely agree with the point you're making. Actually, if we start at the bottom and work our way up, we can make real change. So gender, ethnicity, etc., I believe it's very plausible that we can make substantial change at the lower ends that leads to change in the future. How do we do that for social mobility? How do we do that for people that don't have access to education in the first place, or the kind of people that might ask the question of, would you like to do something like this?
social mobility is more tricky in this country because you can't look at someone and just know where they're from.
Yeah.
Like you can't make that assumption.
Yeah.
And if you said, social mobility, some people opt in and they could opt out.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a story of maybe hardship. So even defining it is quite tricky.
Yeah, yeah.
You do have charities like Upreach that are very good, and they define it by maybe were you on free school meals?
Yep.
And I'm not sure if that's, don't quote me on that, but that could be one.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you say, were you on free school meals? And if you want the talented people out of that, it doesn't mean they don't go to uni, but that might not have been a route through free school meals. And do you get B's or better at A level? And they'll probably support you. But how do you even define social mobility?
Yeah, yeah.
The university thing is interesting because I think less and less people will go to uni. So that might not even be a sign.
Yeah.
And then you look at the people, mate, that run the world. Yeah. How many of them actually finished uni? Bill Gates dropped out. Zuckerberg dropped out. So it's actually really hard to define.
Yeah, yeah.
So the social mobility side, I agree most jobs don't need a degree. You got a degree, I've got a degree. Did we really need it to get to it? I don't think we did.
I didn't.
But it's a filter. It makes life easy when you're bringing people in. So I think that they almost have to tell you what they mean. Because what they I want more poorer people. And then what, do you want to see a bank statement? It's a really hard thing to define.
100%. I think the other one is, I think I reference not knowing your actual name as like a turning point for me when I'm thinking, I don't think about this enough, if that's the right way to phrase it, right? And when I pause on that, I'm a trustee for a university student union. It's the most diverse in terms of social mobility, in terms of ethnicity. We've got endless international students, which is wonderful. But until I got involved, I'd never realised how much their journeys are impacted by everything else that goes on in their life. And I'm almost nervously gone their journeys because I don't want to categorise people, but I'm being honest here. There's times that we've got an idea, we've got a project, we could pay people to do this bit of work. And actually, there's no set criteria as to how you find those people in the first place. So we can open a door here. And then you engage with people. It's like, would you be interested in this? It's like, in theory, I would. But actually, I'm caring for a sick family member. I've also got children of my own that I've got to look after. And I have a weekend job to make the money to justify paying for it. So actually, there's so much more that you don't even think about that sits behind
100%. But we did a piece of work. So we coach a lot of the young people that get jobs. So they'll get a job and we're coaching them. And there's one guy, Paul, who coached a bunch of them. And he's a seasoned coach. And he started collecting the commonalities. Yeah. Because there's part of me that was like, I don't want to believe there is too much of commonalities between groups, but of course they are. Yeah. And you touched on one, which is more often than not, or maybe more than most groups, having quite a complex family background is something that a lot of those young people at your university or in our community, the Salt community would have. Yeah. And you're right, they were like, oh, where have you been? I'm looking after my brother. Yeah. Oh, he's like your mum. No, my mum's not around. Or the carers. And you're right, the complexity when it comes to that overlap between, you could say race, but also socio-demographic, they just have so much more they have to deal with. Yeah, yeah. But then you think, actually, what kind of people do you want in your? They're unbelievably resilient. Yeah. I'll give you one example. I was coaching one of the young people coming through. I won't say his name. And he had a 2-1 from a Russell group. Is Russell Group like LSE? That would be Russell Group. Yeah. 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 High up, really high up there. Brig universities, basically. Really high up there. And I was like, you told me you've got a 2-1. I know nothing about you, really. Because that's like 2-1 from And then I just said, tell me about your parents. And he got very emotional. Yeah. And his parents were immigrants, but they were both disabled. And him and his brother went to Oxford. He went to LSE. He got a 2-1 with a very complex family background. Yeah. And all of a sudden, that degree
means so much more.
Feels a lot. And so that's telling me that you can be very resilient. You deliver in spite of so many challenges. Whereas someone with the same degree, underneath the iceberg, underneath the surface, there might be a bit less there. Yeah. And I don't want to discount that person because they had the privileges, but there's something about this guy that I'd be like, wow, that's unbelievable. Yeah. How did you manage to do that? Yeah. They'd be an amazing recruit. But the thing is though, Ben, he was so grateful to be there. He worked so hard. I was like, don't be so grateful. He didn't believe in his own capabilities because he was like, just work so hard to be there. So you're not just telling them how great they are, you're trying to convince them that they are really valuable beyond the 2-1 from LSE.
Yeah. How do we get this messaging across? Because I think this, and I'll change it slightly because an experience I'm living at the moment is having a young child, right? And in that guise, I've spoken to people in the past who have been overlooked at work because of the commitments that they have outside of work, right? They can't be there on time every day because they have to drop off or pick up for childcare or for nursery or for schooling or for whatever it might be. I don't deny, I sit there and reflect, I'm like single parent, 1 kid, 2 kids, single parents with 3 kids. How on earth do you make it work? I don't mean that, again, I hope it comes across the right way, but I'm flabbergasted because I'm from the 2 of us that are both working and we're finding it hard to balance up getting everything done in the day. Now, actually, when you reflect, you're like, well, actually, someone being able to balance running a family and doing their day job is a completely different skill set from the freedom of someone that doesn't have those responsibilities. But we're never going to get to a point where someone writes on their CV, I'm a 2-1 from LSE, but also I've had a complex background and let me tell you my story. I don't think people will open up. But this is what I find really interesting. So we, on a CV, you're right.
Yeah. Right? And this is probably, because if one of these big banks or big companies open up for a grad scheme, they'll have like 20,000 people apply. So, and they'll probably use AI now and all that stuff and sift through.
Yeah.
But then if I'm sitting there, I'm encouraging them to say that.
Yeah.
So we actually train them in their 5 minutes. We have a module called Self-Knowledge is Power. Mm-hmm. And we go deep on what are your strengths? Tell me your story. Now tell it to me confidently. Because I know that will set them apart.
Yeah.
Because then you as an employer will start asking those questions. And I've got there's an amazing guy, again, I won't say his name. In his final year, or maybe second year, he had a son.
Yeah.
Who was born, it's like something ridiculous, mate, like 27 weeks.
Wow, yeah.
Like super early.
Yeah.
The son survived, which is amazing, against all odds. He finished with a first class from Leicester.
Yeah. That's remarkable. Yeah.
And there's one example where he goes, I've got a first from Leicester. I'm like, I want to hear like how, like in spite of what? And I think that when you are saying, tell me a bit about yourself, if that person says, here's that, here's my degree, but here's a bit about my journey, and as a result, here's what you get from someone like me, because I've proven it, I think people start paying attention. But the thing is, 2 things, I'm not sure the interviewer's looking out for that, to your point, but I'm not sure that young person puts any value on that. They get taught to hide that.
Yeah.
And that's the gold.
Yeah.
That's the gold, because I've met a lot of people with some great degrees, and so have you, who you wouldn't put in charge of anything.
100%. But that's the exact reason we're doing these videos, right? Is to get the message out to people. This is where you can make a difference. But let's put your MD innocent hat on. Yeah. Whatever, you give me a job to recruit for, I send you 5, 10, 15, 20 CVs, depending on whether you want a short list, a long list or whatever. How does anyone get that message to you in the first place? Because they're just pieces of paper at the end of the day.
We haven't talked about it yet, but we had that interaction about technology, and there was that startup. Yeah. I think surely technology will help bring to life and sort people beyond just like the black and white paper on a CV.
Yeah.
There's a company called Visi. I don't know if you've heard of them, but it's really it's a like a online. It's basically like LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But it's much more in depth. It has a psychometric. It gives people the opportunity to bring themselves to life on page. But because it's all tech based, you can still do the sorting of it.
Yeah.
So again, if you're looking for people who are extraordinary, you have to find other ways to get that done.
Yeah.
So I think technology is going to be fascinating in the way that if someone was looking for me, they can probably go online, Google, you do the research.
Yeah.
Well, you probably end up. I'm not sure how long CVs, classic CVs, going to exist.
Yeah.
But then you have to convince people to put this stuff on there.
Yeah.
The amount of people they said, I can say that. I'm like, honestly, that will help you get the job if you say this about yourself. So I think making things less paper-based, using technology to help people really bring to life their character, their experiences, their interests will be interested. I'm less used to your industry though.
Yeah.
So I come from an industry that is a mix of operations. I make stuff in factories, or I've made stuff in factories, but then I've also, my team will be making marketing campaigns. So it depends on the role as well.
Of course.
So if I'm looking for someone
creative,
creative,
to stand out in that vein to you, whether they're working in a factory or whether they're running a marketing campaign, that first interaction you have is still a piece of paper at this point in time.
But how on earth do I know how creative someone is from a CV?
That's my point.
And I think that we have to think more about the job, the industry, and then maybe how what your first look actually looks like of that person. So if I want a marketing director, like I can read the CV, but that's the experience. But actually, I want them to create something that hasn't been created before. And how do I know they're capable of doing that? And by the way, leading a team of creatives, which isn't the easiest thing in the world as well. So unfortunately, all these answers, it means that you have to work harder. It's like leaders have to look for talent.
Of course.
Take more time to look for talent. People are going to be asking more of you to bring to life these CVs. So we've gone super efficient, whereas I actually think to get the difference you want, not just for the sake of it, you actually have to work harder, be a bit more inefficient, actually dig for treasure. And where's the challenge is, where's the time to do it?
Where's the time is a really good discussion point, I think, with yourself. Because while you were doing the role at Innocent, you were part-time, right?
3 days. Started 2.5 days a week, 3 days a week I was running Innocent.
How does that work?
You need a good team. Like what? A lot of people ask that question, and you know, if the team are watching it now, two PAs. Very important. I'm not the most organised person in the world, but you hold your team. You hold great people to account, and in the job when you're running, like when you're running a country, running a big part of the business like that, when my phone goes, I know it's going to be hard. It's going to be like a hard question. The day-to-day stuff, I've got great people managing it. So I always thought, empower the team. They need to know that they can reach me whenever they want. Yes, it was 3 days a week, but it's not like I'm switching off the whole time. But you're empowering the team to get the job done, and you're probably giving them a bit more responsibility. So I can't be on that, what do you call it, industry body. So I ask someone working for me to hold
But
the day-to-day stuff, mate, it's making sure I'm always available. I'm not micromanaging. I trust the team, and if something goes wrong, obviously you have to fix it, but you have to trust and not just be all over people. That's how I tend to manage anyway.
It's interesting because one of the things we get told is as people progress through the ranks, when you're looking to promote up someone in your team, the guidance often for the senior person is make yourself unavailable for periods of the day. Whatever, go to the gym for 2 hours at lunchtime, enforce them to make their own decisions because you're not there as a fail-safe, and help them grow over time, if that makes sense.
Situational leadership, this idea of situational leadership, there's a point where you have to just tell people what to do. Then you coach them. Then you lead them to it and they basically take over. You just have to choose. But at some point, particularly if I'm the MD of Innocent, I've got a commercial director who should be a better commercial director than me. I've got a marketing director who should be better than me. I've got an head of ops. I've got a HR. You've got the full range. They all should be better than me at those jobs. So I shouldn't have to be telling people exactly what to do. I have to create an environment though.
Can all of those jobs on the journey be part-time jobs?
It's a good question. Not all of them.
So how do you get to the top?
Well, you have to do the jobs at some point. So I did. I went through sales. I went through sales and strategy. I've done a commercial director job. I've done a sales director job. Could they be part-time? Well, depends on everyone else and everything else around you. So in your job, if people know that you're 4 days a week and they can't contact you on a Friday and they can manage it, well, why not? But certain jobs that if you're not at your desk, you're not making the money. It's really tricky. Square mile, in my coaching days, obviously I was coaching, I am coaching, an executive coach. If you're working a law firm, if you're part in a law firm, it's pretty tricky. You're billing by the minute. You're billing by 7 or 8 minute intervals, 6 minute intervals. So if you say I'm going to not be there on a Friday, that is going to damage you. Because time is a commodity, whereas in certain industries, like the creative industries, maybe it's less. Time is less of a commodity. I think professional services probably much more so, and manufacturing. If you've got to be at a factory, it's got to be running most of them 24/7.
Yeah. You mentioned before the rise of AI and how the world's changing. When we're talking diversity and inclusion, I went on ChatGPT right before coming in here. When I was thinking about the kind of bits and pieces that I'd like to talk to you about. And I asked the question, like, Jim, if you were interviewing someone and wrote a little bit about yourself, blah, 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 what kind of things would you cover? And the first question it recommended instantly made me think about the problems with D&I that we need to address, because the first question it gave me was, how do you balance diversity goals while maintaining high standards?
Yeah.
Instantly implying that by having diversity goals, we're dropping our standards to achieve it.
Yeah.
How do you address the world when it exists like this?
It does, well, you said it yourself, it makes the assumption that diversity means that you have to compromise. So let me highlight the nuance in this. I think it's really shaky. I haven't fully made my mind up when it comes to, when you're in the job, like saying, actually, I'm going to give you that job just because that person's black. Or I just don't, I find it problematic.
Yeah.
Why? Because that person, if they know it, has a different sense of pressure, and also it's devaluing in many ways. Some might think, brilliant, I've got my way up. Some might think that. Secondly, other people looking at them, there's that stigma. So we talked about the Trump thing now. As soon as diversity equals low quality, there's a stigma there.
Yeah.
So people are saying, actually, that person is not valuable, is not good. So that culturally, it can be really problematic within the organization. I think you need difference. I don't use the word diversity much. That's all I say. If people want to grow, you need to be doing things differently. I was reading the book the other day, and there's a sentence saying, like, your business is perfectly structured and set up to deliver the results you've currently got. Yeah. Right. Pretty good.
True. Yeah.
So if you want different results, you've got to do something different. And you've been in the industry a long time. And I know you're agile and you will move with the times. But I bet you, someone who's young from a different perspective can come and give you a completely different perspective if you listen. Yeah. So I don't believe it's about standards. It's you need difference to do things differently. Yeah. And most companies are measured on year performance, which means growth. So how do you separate the two? First of all, I demand excellence in the team. So we're working with young people, but our standards are probably higher, if not more, than the companies we're trying to get these young people in. Yeah. So we find them, and we're looking for work ethic, commitment. And yes, that's quite hard actually to judge, even from a 2-1 from a Russell group. Yeah. Work ethic, commitment. Then once you've got you in, we put a young person through what we call the Come Correct program. Self-knowledge is power, communicate with confidence, smash an interview process. They get a coach. We work with their line manager. We measure them on criteria. And we want them to get to a point. Yeah. And once they're ready, we then say, right, these guys are ready. Yeah. We're not dropping, it's not in my interests for the standards to be low because it doesn't help anyone. Yeah. So that's my take on it, which is, I do think there might be a risk of people just quickly saying, just give them the job, but they've got to be right for the job. I believe they will be.
And so when you talk you're talking about Psalt.
Psalt, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Researching that. So Psalt exists to help people widen their perspective, seek out difference and discover a new confidence. Imagine a world everyone can realize their potential and use their talents and skills fully. Yeah. So for anyone watching this, how do I sign up to Psalt? How do you make those decisions in the first place? Because you're pushing for diversity, but what are your criteria then? Yeah,
good question. So first, I'm trying to increase black representation in consumer goods. We've kept it tight. We will go broader because Psalt is really about making things possible for anyone. Yeah. So if you really want to do something and you've got the standards or the potential, it's a crime that it's not even possible. So equality of opportunity. Yeah. So what we do, we will find them. We will really understand whether they're up for it or not. We always talk about this big brother, big sister relationship. So you better show up, show up your best. Then we'll help you. We'll equip you, we'll give you work experience, we'll give you a mentor, but not just a warm, fuzzy mentor. It's when we're measuring on some of those things, you need to work on that. Let's find you a right mentor for that. Yeah. Once you get the job, you get a coach, but then your first line manager most line managers, mate, are not equipped to manage anyone, let alone someone who's different.
Yeah.
So we do that. But the organizations, the way we work, it's the organizations that almost forward. I remember phoning you about how to set up a recruitment agency 4.5 years ago. So we're a non-profit recruitment agency, but we're saying to a massive company, we want you to hire 10 of the great talent that we'll develop.
Yeah.
Can you pay up front? Because it costs 10 grand to do all of that with the team we've got.
Yeah.
So, and we're not interested in really helping all the senior stuff. We just want more young people, black people applying for jobs.
Yeah.
And we believe they'll get there on merit.
So how do you find them?
Universities, like the one you're on the board of.
Yeah. So there's social mobility.
Sorry?
Social mobility. People can't get in without uni, or?
No, well, anyone can. So we go online, use social media.
Yeah.
We're not asking for if you got a degree or anything like that.
So you go and approach people rather than they approach you?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a bit of both, because then with words of mouth with young people, they're like, oh, you got that job. Or they'll see a young person post about, the amazing job Kian in my team or in the team or Leroy or Andy's done for them.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, but or my mum asked me to join this because I heard about this.
Yeah.
Or the person at the church or the person at the mosque or the group. So a lot of it is organic.
Yeah.
And we probably need to be a bit more structured and come to universities like yours.
Yeah.
But the challenge, obviously we'll be saying, but we're looking for black talent.
Yeah.
So this is where it gets a bit, oh yeah, if you're black, come to it. It feels quite exclusive at this point.
Yeah.
But that's because we're trying to improve representation. And when you go young, 27% of young black people, that's 16 to 24, unemployed in the UK.
Wow. Yeah.
Versus 10 white.
Yeah.
That's 2024 Office of National Statistics.
Yeah.
So I just don't, and I don't think they know that they're jobs.
Yeah.
They just don't know that it's possible to work in the areas that you recruit for.
Yeah, yeah.
They just don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have to do that first, and then equip them.
Yeah.
So that's how we work.
Yeah, there's definitely part of that journey. I reflect on university days when I went, and also engaging with graduates now. And while you're at university, the big four come and present and tell you how good a career is to work for them, right? As do some of the big banks, depending on the university you go to, because certain universities are targeted and others maybe less so. But while you're there, and even on the commerce side for sure, like Mars come, Nestle come, there's a big message, these are available to you. Actually, some of the best jobs we recruit for are working in the hedge funds, right? With some of the smartest minds out there, but they don't go and present themselves to the world. And in that vein, people knowing they exist in the first place is almost part of the journey, if that makes sense.
Well, think about so everyone wanted a job. Look at our friendship group, right?
Yeah.
So you think, right, you're just about to finish, you want to get on a grad scheme, and some of these industries are brands in their own right.
Yeah.
Management consulting. Does it matter whether it's Bain, Oliver Wyman, BCG?
Yeah.
I'm in management consulting. 50 grand a year starting salary or whatever it used to be. Might be more there. And then you've got banking. Don't care what it is, but I'm in banking. You got law. Doesn't like whether it's Latham Watkins, Mishcon Dure, or Clifford Chance. So you've almost got a brand that sits above them.
Exactly that.
So people go in. But I always say that, but what about the one-word jobs?
Yeah.
Like those are the one-word jobs. What about the two-word jobs? National account manager, supply chain analyst, some of the roles that you recruit for, no one knows about them because certain industries or subsectors of industries do a really bad job of actually not talking about their company.
Yeah.
You talk about the industry. And no one works in the same company for life now. So get them in the industry first.
Yeah.
And at some point, they'll probably get to you if you've got a great value proposition.
Yeah. And that's part of it, right? Actually, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, when we're looking at the senior end and we're trying to achieve diversity quotas, or we're trying to work towards it, you quit.
Yeah.
3 years innocent.
Yeah.
You've decided to move on and do something else. So the stats fall down because you've walked away.
I've had this before, right? And what I'm doing now is, I know, but what I'm doing now is so much harder.
Yeah.
And no one's doing it.
Yeah.
And I believe that there are people who've seen me that I can do the job and I can do the job successfully.
Yeah.
And they will see that that's possible and they'll get there.
Yeah.
Yes, I quit, but then I feel, I guess, called to be working with young people, actually talking to my peers in leadership roles. First of all, empathizing with them and saying, come into the conversation, do something different. And I want to help organizations actually build. We work with a lot of brands.
Yeah.
We're growing people that don't want to work in these companies. Some of them are amazing, but it takes 20 years to build. Look how long it's taken to build what you built.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of energy from the breadth of that.
Yeah.
And, you never know what's going to happen in the future. But yeah, you're right, I've gone. But then at the same time, there's, tens, if not more, of young people that we've managed to get great starts that will probably get my job in the next few years. Anyway.
Yeah. And so in that vein, you view it as a 10, 15, 20-year project.
Well, it's someone in a different industry, your job, I met up with, and they got asked the same question, saying, can I have a diverse shortlist?
Yeah.
And they looked around for this specific job, and they did some work on it, said, actually, looking at this, it will take 15 years to actually be able to give you a positive answer on having a black woman in that job.
Yeah.
I was like, but who's going to do the work?
Yeah.
No one's doing it. There are elements of it, but no one's doing it.
Yeah.
So it will take that long.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be within recruitment, it's going to be tougher in senior roles, I reckon, for the next 10 years. But the work has to start now.
Yeah.
So it gets easier.
Yeah.
But no one thinks that far out.
No, well, that's why I reference it. We have those discussions so frequently because we're asked to do it, if that makes sense, right? Like I'm running a CEO role at the moment, and I've been told, can you produce a diverse shortlist? And actually, ethnicity is very easy because there are senior leaders in financial services that come from a variety of backgrounds. Yeah. The gender piece is harder when you're told the individual must be an SMF1 registered with the regulator as the chief exec. Because I emailed 350 firms chief execs saying, hey, any shouts or recommendations from your network? And when I reflect, I think I emailed more Jonathans than I did women, right? Because that's how the industry is at this point in time. When I put it onto the compliance world, there has been a surge and a shift over time on the gender piece because fundamentally senior female lawyers moved into the space and there were other obvious areas that you could target people to come into the space. That's why I go back so frequently to social mobility because I don't know, I fear getting people the opportunity in the first place to even get going, and I fear people not understanding their situation that makes it harder to get going. And when I reflect, I flip it onto for those that don't know, I'm also the chairman of a football club, right, Hampton and Richmond Borough. And we have individuals that come in and we're quite regimented with nutrition and with expectations of training. We expect you to turn up on time and to be committed or whatever. We have individuals that we haven't considered their background and how they've got to where they've got to because they turn up and we ask, 20 minutes into a training session, we're like, hold up, you're normally really fit, you're flagging today. And they've only had a bag of crisps all day, but they haven't had the opportunity or don't have the finances to buy something else. We've got guys in moulds when you need long studs and they're falling over, but they can only afford to buy one pair of boots in the first place. And there's so much that until we started asking the questions, we didn't know that there were problems there.
But you're looking though. You're asking the question. Some people would say that's not my problem. You just have to show up. So my responsibility, and I can understand that. So surely my responsibility starts once you're on the training pitch and you're ready to go. But what we have to do with leaders and managers, because everyone's like, leaders are managers, right? So I intentionally use the word managers in this, is get them to be looking. Get them to understand, because that player who's probably just done training a bag of crisps and kind of did all right. Can you imagine if you were able to lean into his situation a bit more? What would be possible? But you have to be aware. So the work we do with line managers starts with just because you're a line manager, do you realize the responsibility you have? So getting them to really appreciate that it's not just like a nice label. It's really, and then do you realize the potential within your team? You don't even know who's in your team. White, black, anyone. Everyone's different. And then do you know how to manage difference when you see it? So when that situation happens, how do you manage yourself and your impulses? Maybe it's fear. What should I do? How do you manage your own triggers, your own state? And there's a lot of psychology behind that. And then how do you interact with them? That's huge. Like if the world was full of better managers, this wouldn't be an issue, because they'd be coming to you saying, I need this kind of person. They'd be more specific. They'd be making more of an effort.
Makes sense. I always reflect, like, I remember getting told when I was studying my MBA and we did a few modules on diversity, one of the discussion points was diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion's being invited to dance, and equity is being asked what type of music you want to listen to when you're dancing.
Yeah.
And when I reflect, I'm like, I believe in our world, the diversity side, as in being invited to the party in the first place, is the discussion point that happens all the time. But I don't think there's enough reflection on, and how do we encourage you to dance, and how do we make you feel comfortable dancing because you understand and believe and buy into what's going on around you. And I think that's the bit that I really struggle to know how anyone can truly make a difference, because time is the answer, right? And conversation and engagement. And sadly, most people suffer from the belief that they don't have enough time to do what they need to do in a day, let alone looking past themselves.
If Gareth, who you know, was here, so Gareth I saw Rise with, and he runs Nando. He's the chief people officer for Nando's Global now. So he would say, I'll be going, it's just about the individual. So you need to get line managers to really create environments and really invest in the team and create environments where that individual they manage can bring more of themselves. And then you've got to work on that individual, because they can be coming from quite a long way away to be brave enough to take up the space that you're giving them as a line manager. And he will say, yeah, Sam, I saw well and good, but if your system doesn't change, you can do all that. But actually, if your policies don't change on childcare, for example, or if you, things like childcare, bereavement, or like a bunch of stuff, the way or law firms, okay, if a 4-day week, I don't know how you change law firms. How do you change the model so someone can be just as successful working 4 days? I don't know how to do that. So he would rightly say, you got to work on the individual, you got to work on the line manager, but you got to change the system. And I think in certain industries, and I do a lot of coaching in, like I said, hedge funds, financial services, it's more tricky because you don't have as much flexibility in the policies.
In the model.
In the model. And that's the bit that you think, if you really believed in something, you might want to try and change that. I don't know what the answer is, but you can. When people say, where do you even start? If you're a line manager, there's this concept of islands of sanity. Margaret Wheatley, someone of my people at Salt, mentioned her. She thought she could change the world, literally, but then she said, actually, you just have to do what you can with what you've got. And you create islands of sanity. And that's what you do. And with everything going on in the world, I think a lot of people just want to think that there are leaders and managers that are all right. Like decent people. So you're the first port of call on a Monday when someone can think, oh, finally, there's someone who actually sees me, because I'm watching a lot of stuff on TV that just suggests everything's going to pot. There's no decent leader around. So it's really making sure you do what you can do where you are. And then we've got to try and just like light more fires. That's how I see it.
No, it makes perfect sense. So how does it then feel when you're trying to make a difference and Trump comes out and says, let's remove all D&I departments. Let's blame diversity and inclusion for plane and helicopter crashes.
I wrote a post before actually that, but when the whole I've always had a challenge with D&I, because I don't think it's an $8 billion industry. $8 billion. And you think, okay, if I looked at the return on investment of that $8 billion, have we really seen much? Probably not. There's probably been a lot of tokenism. At the same time, there's been a lot of sort of shouty, non-empathetic, non-inclusive, ironically, conversations that bring people into this. So I think that the issue remains the same. I think that what people thought might be the medicine maybe wasn't done quite right. So, including, I think you just have to keep going. But my language is important. I want difference. I don't just want people who look different. I want them to bring their difference. I want organizations to be powered by difference. So yes, you can just be the same and do the same. It's really hard actually just to do the same thing. It's like if you didn't grow next year, you'd be working as hard as you are right now. It's really hard. So let alone change. So like, making that effort to change something requires difference. And you're challenging leaders to say, do something different. So even the language I'm using, hopefully in this, is actually more inclusive than saying, you just give like, microaggression, psychological safety. I get all that, but once you bring the jargon and the words in, unfortunately, people's eyes start glazing over.
Yeah.
So I think you need to change the conversation, but Trump needs some different thinkers.
Yeah.
Dominic Cummings, do you remember when he wrote that thing, whether you like it or not, saying we're looking for, weirdos and freaks to come and join the civil service? Like, he was kind of saying that.
Yeah.
But probably could have got the wording a bit better.
Yeah. But I think it's intentionally, Cummings is highly intellectual, whether people like him or not, highly opinionated, whether people like him or not. And in essence, I think the messaging of that was more a push to say, we're looking far and wide and we are what we are, if that makes sense.
And we're looking for difference, though. I need some people who think differently, because I'm probably looking around thinking, really?
Yeah.
That's what you, like, so, if you'd have called it D&I, everyone's eyes might have glazed over.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if that's what you actually meant.
Yeah. Oh, and I can see that. I think, but politics is the most fascinating one of everything in my eyes, right? Because it's one of the only real industries where you can suddenly get picked up and dumped into something that you know nothing about, right?
Yes.
Like you can get voted in and suddenly you're the health secretary or whatever position it is, you're the chancellor. Maybe chancellor's unlikely because you tend to have seen a economic or maths or something background, but it's a discussion point, and you can get picked up from one department and move to another, and you can be the leader of something that you've never worked in, which just doesn't really happen in the real private sector, if that makes sense.
Not in junior, medium roles. Sometimes in the bigger roles, you might get people like move to a bigger job.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? Yeah. You're right. You are right.
We see it. Whatever, global head of legal becomes global head of legal and compliance, right? Takes a new area because there's a belief in them as a leader more than anything. And it's interesting then, because we talk about background and how you get there. One of the biggest frustrations in my industry is when legal and compliance departments come together, ultimately compliance officers aren't legally qualified, so the leader tends to be from the legal side rather than the compliance side. So instantly when you bring them together, you're creating that first conflict of the two departments and how they engage, if that makes sense. But when we reflect, I'm just trying to think what takeaways I can have and what I can do differently, because when I'm shortlisting, I don't dictate the market. So there's not a great deal I can do. But I can push for outside thought, right? This person might not hit 10 out of 10 of your criteria, but they hit 6. And this is where their other transverse skills or overlapping skills, or other bits and pieces can make them credible candidates. But the problem is the people I'm engaging with have got to be open to that discussion, because ultimately if we're getting paid a fee, they want someone that they know day one can just do it and get on with it. They don't want to train, develop, grow. I think it's so much clearer how we can make a difference at the bottom end. And then ultimately the discussion I feel like we're having is it just takes time. Well, that's it. And we're fighting a world that hasn't invested enough before.
And no one cares about 10 years. Like, no one thinks they're going to be doing whatever they're doing in 10 years.
Exactly that.
And that's what's brutal about change, right? It takes you investing loads of time now to see something in the future when no one's looking beyond the next 3 years, 4 years. So the amount of time you need to be convincing whole organizations. So we've done whole business conversations with some of the biggest companies about why this is important. And that works really nicely because all of a sudden it filters down and through and everyone knows why you're doing it. But you're right, some lone hiring manager or hiring, I don't know, recruitment team go, cheers, Ben. Like, just I've got
tick the boxes.
Just tick a box. Let's get someone in. I get it. So that's why we had to start SORT, because I think it's easier to flood, or at least have a better representation starting now, and someone's got to do it and do it well and demand the standard, because those people won't get promoted. They won't pass probation if they're not good.
And does that in turn create a potential future problem, because that's closing the door to other people to apply because you're a certain niche within a market?
What, apply for? What do you mean?
I'm thinking you find 10 talented young black professionals or soon-to-be professionals coming out of university. You get them access to whatever, one of your prior businesses or a similar business or some of the commerce big names. And there's only, there's 10 positions on a grad scheme one year, and all 10 of them go to your guys because they're going to get the coaching, the training that other people don't get. So in theory, they're better quality candidates, but it also means those gaps aren't available for anyone else.
But I was thinking, let's get to that problem, because I'm just talking about it's 4%, black people, 4% of the population. I just want 4, just give me 4. In fact, if you want to accelerate it, all right, give me 8.
So
that's one. I've had 10 roles. I'm just asking for 1. And I don't think many people argue with that. I understand when it gets really tense, when someone says, actually, Ben, don't apply for that job because I'm going to give it to a black woman.
Yeah.
I get why that's difficult.
Yeah.
But the one analogy that, this was at a church playground, speaking to my friend. We had our kids in the playground, and one of my good friends from Zimbabwe. I remember the South African rugby team. Obviously, coming out of apartheid, they had the quota system.
Yeah.
And actually, this might be really controversial, but you had a lot of black players, other than like Habana and the Beast. You had a bunch of other people that had no right to be taking the place of some of those players.
There's Chester Williams. There's some talent.
Subjective, okay, but that's one. Right?
Yeah.
But then if you look at some of the players, Michael Mark should be starting a hooker.
Yeah.
But he's the best hooker in the world, comes off the bench.
Yeah.
But there was this collective, whether you like it or not, people didn't like it, Peterson didn't like it, okay. But years and years on, mate, the players now are getting there completely on merit.
Yeah.
But that's because they saw the Chester Williams, they saw Habana, they saw Beast. And also that's because Rassie Erasmus, when you ask about, he's won 2 World Cups, when you ask about his most proud moments, and this is in the newspaper, he said, actually finding Khaleesi when he was 15, 16, and following through the pathway. And yes, maybe it should have been starting every game, no, but you stick with it. So this is the conflict I have in me, which is people say you can't be what you can't observe and like what you can't see. If there's no one there, then no one's ever going to come through on merit. So that's why I'm torn. I'm not giving an answer on that, but when he gave me that example, I was like, you're right. Now all these players are coming through because they saw a handful, and some of them probably weren't as good, as they weren't the best option. That's a 25 year. That was from the 95 World Cup.
100%. And for us to achieve any of that, it requires role models, and it requires people getting in there in the first place, and it requires people growing and showing and telling their stories, right? I mean, whatever, I turn the direction slightly now, but I remember being in my kitchen one day and suddenly hearing my wife shout from the front room, "Sam's on the telly." I'm like, sorry, what? Sam's on the telly. What's she talking about? I go into the front room and there you are on The Apprentice, right?
Not as a contestant, obviously.
No. I'd have enjoyed watching that. But you were there on behalf of Innocent, doing a deal with engaging with both teams, etc. Stuff like that surely is great publicity, and is something that should be seen and encouraged and pushed and makes people believe it's achievable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are fantastic senior black leaders, and they are brilliant. And there is some, again, controversy. The same lady that I told you at the start of this, when she came to the office and she was like, "How do you speak to people?" She said, "Sam," someone said to her once, like, "Show me a mediocre black woman on a board." They don't exist. When they're on there, they're excellent. Show me a mediocre man.
Loads.
You can see that. And I think there is some, I do think there's something in there, and there's some fancy. We look at some of the senior black people, I'm speaking specifically on black, you think, get them more on TV. And then get other people watching it. And the people that, like, I did get really nice messages from people saying, it's just great, like, to see that, but also not just to see me, but to see, like, what I said and how I said it. And I thought, I didn't think of it that way. But and that's what happens. And then hopefully, like, my daughter might want to go into business, or as a result, or other people that saw that. But it does take time. But you have to make as much effort now for a future outcome. Which is the hard bit.
Well, and look, that's what we find the hardest, full stop. I've said it already in this, but I can't change what the market is, but I can work hard to push for change for the future. And in my eyes, that has to happen at the bottom and work its way up. And I think for gender, for ethnicity, it's perfectly achievable and plausible. Social mobility is the bit I can't get my head around at all. How do we get the opportunity to people in the first place that deserve it, but also have so much extra stress and pressure on their lives that a lot of us have never had to even think about, let alone live?
There's a lady who works, a woman who works further down, just this way, just works in a monument, and I did a YouTube clip with her. Her name's Michelle Weston. She's amazing. In terms of a social mobility story, it's unbelievable. And you almost need because it's not obvious, like, oh, that's a black lady.
Yeah.
You almost need them to tell their stories.
Yeah.
And hers was like, oh wow, it's possible to do what you did.
Yeah.
And getting some people like that on.
Yeah.
And we did it. It was on Michelle West on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's like a 25-30 minute interview, but she excelled in the financial service industry. She's amazing. And she's got that story. Then other people seeing that think, what, you can do that? You know, we don't often go back and show people what's possible, go to the school. And sometimes you have to just show them the car you drive. Because when you're 16, you're not thinking, oh, I'm going to be really fulfilled at 30. You're thinking, oh, what's your salary? What car do you drive? How big's your house? Sometimes you have to, that's how you engage some of the young people.
Oh, look, we see that the journey of career professionals, right? Like money is so important to begin with. People move jobs a lot at the junior ends because the cost of living is frightening at the moment and they can't make rent and pay bills and everything else. So they shuffle a few times. And then people that have sat in one job for 30 years question them because they're moving and they haven't moved. And it's that the differential thought patterns more than anything. It's how you explain it to the world. But then as they get more senior and they get to a point of a level of financial comfort and a belief that they'll have their savings and their mortgage paid down or whatever it might be, all of a sudden direction of travel changes, right? Like family takes over, so career might be less important, or the need for intellectual stimulation or drive changes what you're looking for.
You have an existential, I've got X more years of this. And each week is going faster and faster.
100%.
Fulfillment, like a sense of purpose beyond I say just work. It's really important. Because you're looking, am I okay? Family, whatever that might mean to you, your job and your community and life. You could actually look across those. Faith is a big factor of that as well.
And so to wrap up, on the Psalt side of things, to make sure people are clear watching this, if I'm at home and I desperately want my opportunity, what do I need to do to get?
I'd say, if you're a young black talent looking to start your career, you want to start a career, just go to salt.co, so psalt.co, sign up, and then you're in, and you know it's always free for you, always free. We never ask anything of you, we always support you. The line manager piece is not just specific to consumer goods. We've been doing a lot more work on it. And actually, a lot of people say, we just want our line managers to be great line managers and get more out of their teams. So that will be on the website as well. As it should be uploaded by the time, should be a new website by the time this comes out. I think it's those two things. And we're a CIC, so if anyone's looking to donate, please do, because we're always going to be a charitable endeavor, because we pump all the money back into developing the young people.
And what about people that want to be mentors? They can sign up as well? Or?
Specifically on mentors, it's with our partners. So we get our mentors from our partner companies.
Gotcha.
So because we're trying to get them obviously into those companies as well. So that's tighter. But on the just express interest, and it's great. And other industries, do this in your own industry. I know there's a few ones popping up. But it's got to be you got to see all the way through from attracting people to, I believe, I want our guys to get their first promotion. Because then, to your point on mobility, it's not just getting the job. You want to see them. You want some momentum upwards.
Well, they're the big discussion points. When I reflect on, like, the more people I interview, the more people I have these discussions with, coaching, mentoring come out so frequently as like paths to success or paths to the top or whatever. And a lot of the guidance is go and find your own internally, right? Go and speak to people that are one or two rungs up the ladder from you and ask them how they got there and if they can guide and help you to get there in the first place. And that's why I ask so many of the questions, because for us, like, getting people jobs in the first place is what we're paid to do. But when they stick it out and get promoted and develop and grow, they tend to come back to us regularly for business, which is good for us. I don't question that at all. But also, it shows the value of what we're doing to the organisation. So
it's the growth, and if you're a great advocate for them and creating opportunities for them through actually vouching for them even more, they'll come back to you even more down the line as well.
Pay it forward. Sam, thank you.
Hey, thank you. It was a good chat.
Enjoyed.